What is up, and welcome back to Talking Nutrition. Today's episode 46. We have another guest on, my good friend and previous coach, Lisa. What's up, Lisa?
Hi, Johan. How are you doing?
I'm pretty good. What about you?
Very good. Thank you. I'm over here in Toronto, so I'm like 7 hours behind you. For me, the day has only just begun.
I saw you were there. It's like one of the very few times I see you in a slightly less warm place, I feel like.
Yes, and to be honest, it's not going to happen very many times again. So I'm sure this is a lovely city normally, but I'm not enjoying it as much. Like, this is probably one of the least favorite places I have traveled to over the last few years.
Really? Why is that?
Because like I said, I mean, weather-wise, it's a bit of an adjustment. So for those of you listening, I have just come here from Colombia, and I generally try to seek out the warmth. So I'm kind of a summer chaser. Over the last few years, I've been to places like Bali and Mexico and Dubai and so on. So this is indeed, I thought end of April, beginning of May, I would be more or less on the safe side when it comes to weather, but I was very much mistaken. I woke up this morning to like 2 degrees Celsius, so not that much fun. But I saw on your stories that you had a massive snow dump, so that's interesting also.
It's still winter over here. Like, we're still looking at like quite a bit of snow. It actually stopped snowing now, but I mean, it's May 2nd and we had a whole bunch of snow again, so
that's incredible.
Yeah, fun.
So I guess I actually have a question for you straight away. What amount of vitamin D do you take in then? Because of course for me it's just an adjustment period now also, but even after 2 weeks I'm like, oh, where's the sun? I want the sun.
I usually take 5,000.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's what I usually have our clients do as well. So I kind of looked at, what's kind of like normally the okay amount for most people, I think it's like 2,000-ish, like 4-ish on the higher end. I always take 5. I have for a long time. I combine that with K3, K2 and D3, K2. More is not necessary, I think. I checked it. The last time was last year. I haven't had any blood work done yet this year, but it was fine. So yeah, it's actually all good. Like we barely get any sunlight. That's the thing now. At least for half a year. So now we're actually getting towards the summer. So right now the sun rises like 4 a.m. already.
Wow.
And the days are getting longer. So we're getting close to summer, which is where it's going to be light for 24 hours a day,
Of course, yeah. So that's June and like 21st of June or something like that.
June, July, yeah. I think it's end of June. I always forget the actual dates. But cool, it's good to have you on. We recorded a podcast episode for Lisa's podcast together last week. So now we're here. Today we wanted to talk about lean gaining, which I think is a really cool topic because you and me both, like we talk about weight loss a whole lot, fat loss and those kind of things, and we try to educate. I really think, I'm of the opinion that pretty much everyone can benefit of a dedicated muscle gaining phase, even if it's just to kind of get over that thing of the scale slightly moving up, I think a lot of people are often thinking, hey, I want to look better, I got to be lighter. I'm going to be even lighter and then lighter. But there's very little focus on muscle gain. And I mean, for the listener, Lisa was my coach a little while ago, and we bulked for a very long time. I think that was like a year. I think it was,
right? I was just going to say at least 9 months, but probably more like a year.
I think you're right. It was 2021, and I think it was just about 9 months because I had some maintenance like weeks or something like before and after. So that's right. And during even, I think. But that's correct. So, I mean, all I can say is like that whole process was a little uncomfortable sometimes because you are gaining some body fat over time, etc. Which is also why I wanted to talk about lean gaining. Like the name sometimes is a little, at least for people who don't know like how it really works, like it's maybe even almost like misleading, but that's what it's called. So I want people having the right expectations, but like that process was definitely a little weird, getting heavier again over time, but then afterwards doing a cut and then revealing that was so cool. And like, that's when you get to see the result really, you know. So wanted to talk about that because, you know, as a female, I think we're seeing even fewer people go through that, right? So tell us a little bit about your current lean gaining phase. Like, how is it going so far? How long have you been going? And yeah, let's start there.
Yeah, I'll give you a little bit of a background. So I guess I'm a nutrition coach, as well as Johan introduced me. I'm the owner and operator of Nutrition Coaching in Life. We have a small team, all in all, and I would say probably 70% of the people that we work with is general population. We do have a couple of athletes. We have a few people that are performance focused. But as you say, the majority of people are kind of more weight loss focused. Nonetheless, even here, we advocate with many women, especially those who are new to strength training, to go into or to try to build more muscle, even at maintenance, because as a beginner, as a novice to lifting, you can actually build muscle even in a deficit. But you know, the more advanced you get, the more building blocks you just need to supply your body with. So building blocks as in like calories overall. And so if I look at myself, I have been strength training for about 9 years now. So I'm definitely more of an advanced lifter. And I used to be and still am a big advocate, as I was saying, of maintenance phases, because I truly think it allows you to live and enjoy life the best. And you can still, particularly in the beginning, see a lot of advance or progress when it comes to, you get stronger, you get more definition, you're still taking care of hormones, you're sleeping well, etc. But for some reason, I didn't. So in the previous years, or in the last 2-3 years, I basically stayed at maintenance because I really felt very comfortable in my body. Before that, I have come from a background of yo-yo dieting or not yo-yo dieting, but basically restrictive dieting, from going from paleo, low carb, you name it, whatever, until I found macros, and have been loving life since then, because I'm sure Johan has spoken about macros plenty of times before, but just the amount of freedom that you gain through macros, in the sense of what you can eat. And I travel a lot, as I just alluded to also. And I think macros are a beautiful way to still feel able to enjoy different cultures and try new things, but while practicing moderation. So before that, I remember traveling once when I was doing like paleo, and I was in Asia. I was in Thailand at the time, and I vividly remember standing in the supermarkets starting to cry, because everything, or it was in the supermarket, it was a food court, everything came with rice, everything, I had something in there that I quote unquote couldn't eat. So I guess just a little bit of a side rant. I think macros are great for traveling, even if you're just estimating or guesstimating things. But anyway, so basically from 2020 to 2022, roughly, I was just at calorie maintenance, but because my lifestyle changed throughout, sometimes I went through like more walking periods, just because where I was living, I was walking more, and then I had a little bit of an injury with my hip, so my training adjusted. And for some reason, I don't believe that at the end of this, so like in 2022, my quote unquote maintenance calories were still my maintenance. I noticed that I was leaning out. I mean, this is a luxury problem, I guess. I became slimmer. I became hungrier, though. My period was more irregular and so on. And so I thought, oh, okay, maybe I actually do need to bump up my calories. And then someone else coincidentally at the same time said to me, hey, Lisa, I think, well, it was very lovingly, but just kind of like, hey, I think I don't see you do as much glute work anymore. I feel like your leg strength has kind of decreased. Your glutes have kind of decreased and stuff. And I was like, I mean, I didn't have a coach at the time. So again, there would be the value of a coach in those instances, but I was very, very grateful for that person to, again, lovingly point it out. It was not like, hey, your ass is getting flat. It was it was more in the sense of like very, nicely. And so I started thinking, hey, you're right. I really should try this. And also just from a coach's perspective, I mean, I had prior to that never gone through an intentional gaining phase. Again, when I was more in the paleo realm, when I was doing more CrossFit, I certainly was more at maintenance / surplus, but it never had been an intentional calorie surplus. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to do this even just for the coaching experience. But mind you, I was actually kind of afraid of it or hesitant because I guess I should define lean gaining at first also. So basically, as we said, you need to be in a calorie surplus, so eating more calories than what your body is burning, and with the intention that you're gaining weight. For most women, that is kind of scary. Of course, the thought behind this is that you're mostly gaining muscle and minimal fat. So that would be my differentiation between a lean gaining phase and like a proper bulk or even a dirty bulk. So when people say dirty bulk, that's kind of like just eat whatever as much as you can, and it doesn't matter how much fat you're putting on. But yeah, certainly most people do not want that. But nonetheless, like I think even just the other phrase of like bulking, it doesn't sound very feminine. So even in my coaching practice, I don't really use that word because I think most people shy away from it. We even hear from clients, and I'm sure it's the same for you, Johan. We even hear, oh, I don't want to look too bulky, etc. So if you come to someone who says that, hey, you should do a bulking phase, they're going to like run the other direction pretty quickly. But if you say, hey, you're saying you want to shape more, you want to tone up more, that's their wordage, and you and I both know that means gaining muscle. But in the sense, you could say like, hey, you told me this is your goal, so what we need to do is actually you need to do an intentional strength and muscle gaining phase or something like that. And right, so if you frame to them, yeah, let's lean gain, it always sounds a little bit better. And for me also, just with that thought, I'm generally a person, I need to take baby steps. I need to do things slowly. And if someone would have said to me right away, hey, we're bumping up your calories by 30%, I would have said like, fuck no. I'm
That's
not
a lot too, I think.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I would have never done that. So my initial increase was actually just by 10%. So I bumped it up very marginally and didn't notice, or the weight didn't go up for the first 3 weeks. So I bumped it up another 5%, so 15% for probably the first 3 months or so. So I'm now, this is my 8th month actually. I committed initially to a minimum of 6 months, and there was a reason behind this as well, because some people think, hey, can I just do like a month gaining phase or even 2 or 3? But reality is, A, you're not going to see a lot of progress during that time. It does take some time for your body to like adjust, and B, if you were to do a cut afterwards, sometimes everything that you gained, you're basically cutting away in those next 3 months again anyway. So if anyone out there has an intention of doing a gaining phase, I would recommend something similar to like at least 6 months, closer to a year is usually a great amount of time, and you're not going to regret it afterwards. The thing that went well for me or worked well for me during that time too was that I wanted to time it in a way where I'm not somewhere close to a beach or somewhere super hot anymore, because again, like I said, I was in Mexico before going to Colombia, and I was in a city in Colombia where it's a little bit cooler, so you do wear a t-shirt or a sweater every now and then, and it's in Mexico I would have felt uncomfortable going to the beach most days in a bikini, and even though from the outside it doesn't look like by now I have gained any or a lot of body fat, still I feel very different. As you said, there are days where you're just not feeling that great. But I should go back to the beginning. So the intention was to gain about half a kilo or a maximum or about a pound per month. And that's a very, I mean, we always have to look at things from the perspective of how tall or big is this person right now. For someone your size, like I started the gaining phase at 53.5 kilos. So, you know, the percentage wise, it's very different. For me, that's like about, what is it? I'm terrible with percentage, but that's about like 1% or so per, no, 10%? Jesus, I can't do maths. But no, it's about 1% per month, right?
Per month,
So
okay, yeah.
For you, we obviously have to scale that up for someone who's a little bit of a larger size. With 100 kilos, you're going to aim for like 1 kilo or so per month. But anyway, that was the intention. And my body played along so nicely, I have to say. It really, like, so far, up until last month, so I'm now at 57.1. So just a little bit below that target. The last month it's kind of stagnated, even though I actually bumped up my calories further. So I'm now at 20% above where I started. And I mostly increased calories through carbs. So I kept my protein the same. I increased my carbs, especially around my training time. And I would say those things are, these could be regarded as some tips for someone who wants to do a lean gaining phase. So bunching more carbs around your training time, that's when it's most likely that your body is going to use it for muscle gain rather than storing it as fat. The other thing that I did still do was I still continued to track reasonably accurately. So, 80-90% of the time I would weigh out my things. It's not like, oh, yeah, I'm in a bulking phase now. Every meal I'm going to have a burger or eating out or whatever. And I mean, you're smiling, but still some people think, hey, I have more food, more room to play. So now I can have more of the ice.
That's why I'm smiling.
Yeah.
Because you get that, you kind of get that idea. And I had that multiple times. I remember. That's why I was laughing. It's like, I'm eating more calories anyway, I can be a little looser, I'll have a little bit more. And that's a very kind of like slippery slope to go down, I think.
100%.
Because before you know it, you're getting closer to kind of like a dirty bulk-ish, zone where it's a little too flexible,
Yeah, and let's not forget that with those things where we're estimating, there's just more room for error. And even with things where we're scanning a barcode, or where we're like, let's say the ice cream that you purchase and you take home and you scan the barcode, still anything that's processed or packaged, there is like a 27 or whatever percent room for error, where they can actually, even though it might say 100 calories per whatever, it might be 130. So, the more stick with the 80-90% whole food rule. Of course, that the quantity in and of itself is going to increase, is going to increase a little bit if you have more calories to play with. But nonetheless, I did really try intentionally to keep it at 2-3 meals out per week. And I do think that has been one of the biggest blessings, because also the other thing is, when you have more of those processed things or you eat out more, inevitably you're going to feel fluffier the next days, most of the time. Not always, but add the extra sodium, just different kind of foods that your digestion is perhaps not used to. And so I really wanted to minimize that feeling of, I don't want to be in this gaining phase anymore. Still, again, there were some days where I felt like that. For me, usually it's around my ovulation, but I have that even when I'm not in a lean gaining phase, that like 5-6 days of the month I just feel fat, even though I know I'm not, objectively not, and I know logically also, but that's how I feel. And so of course this is exacerbated, or maybe that perception is blurred a little bit, if you are in a gaining phase and then your first thought is, this is because I'm eating more. And then, like, even for me as a coach, and I have been, nutrition coaching for 5 years now. So this is exactly what I tell my clients. And my first thought is like, of course, that's not because you're eating a couple of hundred calories more. This is because yesterday, because you're around your ovulation or whatever. But our first thought just goes to, it's because of the food that I ate. And the next instinct is, I want to pull out of this. I want to go back into a cut, or I want to reduce my calories. And here, this is the other caution that I'm going to say, like, stick with your plan. Really stick with your plan. Don't do any knee-jerk reactions, even though you might have been, gaining for 3-4 months or whatever. And this is where a coach does come in really, really handy, who can talk you out of it, or you simply have someone else who holds you accountable, or you mark something on your calendar where you're like, nope, up until that point, I'm going to keep going. What still in those instances, in my experiences, can help you feel less fluffy, less fat, I guess, is again those whole foods, still making sure we're eating whole foods, but under that point too, really making sure that digestion is smooth. This is actually a funny quote unquote problem that probably a lot of people are not used to dealing with if they come from more of a calorie restriction side, which most women do, let's be honest. I had to learn that I needed to swap to eat less fiber, for instance. I needed to learn that, okay, my increased calories, my increased carbs, I shouldn't just triple the amount of vegetables that I'm eating, because otherwise I'm clogging up my digestive system. Or even things like oats. You can't just eat 300-400 grams of carbs through oats, or at least I cannot. My digestion doesn't let me. Otherwise, I'm going to be super bloated and blocked up. And so I had to learn, hey, actually, in my case, more rice is great, especially around training. Again, this is where your body's going to absorb this really nicely. Or just other things where it really required a shift from that dieting mindset where you're like, I need to get the leanest cut of chicken, I need to get the leanest bit of fish, and then suddenly, hey, Lisa, you got more room to play with, so maybe just swap all the lean stuff for the fatty stuff now, and you're going to have an easier time getting all the food in. So if you're a female who's coming from more of that calorie restriction background, or maybe even just someone in general who's just gone through a cut, wanting to go into a lean gaining phase, it's really, I don't want to say it's a 180, but all the strategies where we're usually like, hey, don't drink your calories, don't, take out the peanut butters and so on. We can flip-flop that often in a lean gaining phase where we're like, I'm struggling to eat all this food. Okay, maybe I'm making my first meal into a smoothie because I don't need to chew it all, and I can easily put more banana, more peanut butter, and whatever in there to get my calories. And I don't know if you ever had that issue when you were lean gaining or when you were gaining.
I did. So I think, so it's going to depend on the person. For me though, like, I agree with you on the oats, because I always eat a lot of oats. And in the beginning, I think I was adding a lot, but I did notice that digestion wise. So I would switch that for more rice, or basically a cream of rice, but actually both. I just like white rice. It's just easy. So my post workout was cream of rice. My breakfast was still oats, but I was just trying to add stuff that was easier to digest,
Mm-hmm.
It's like I said, you can actually have a whole bunch of white rice and be okay with it digestion wise. But then if it's oats, and I'm not here like demonizing oats either, but like that could be one of those.
I love oats. No, absolutely.
Same. So that could be one of them. I think it's weird too sometimes, because also for clients, you tend to think like it has to be all clean. You know what I mean? I actually talked to someone recently, and he was like, yeah, I was on this plan and I was trying to bulk, but it was so much food and I couldn't get it in because it was so much. He said like, I was so much chicken and broccoli. I was like, okay, well, sounds very typical too, right? You always hear like the chicken and broccoli and the rice, but like there's definitely a time and place for first of all the flexible foods, and then the fattier foods, which I also think, as much as I like lean protein sources, doesn't mean that the fattier ones are bad either, So
absolutely not. No.
I think it's a funny one, because people do struggle with that, like whether it's a lean gaining phase or a reverse diet even, we think automatically, as much as even you and me too, even that goes for the skill, but also food and stuff, we still kind of think sometimes like more, okay, that's not a good thing. You know what I mean? Because we've just been like hearing that over and over again.
So for me, that was actually like a great experience, because I really just saw like, hey, everything is tools that we can use at different times of the, even like if you compare to you're building something or you're creating something, and you have different tools for different phases, different seasons, and that's exactly it. The chicken breast and rice, and trying to keep the food volume high is amazing when you're on a really low calorie diet, and you just want to feel a little bit fuller, and you have like 40 grams of fats to play with. But then if you have double that or even more, we don't, like, most of us are not professional bodybuilders that have the time to just train and eat and sleep. So, the majority of people are not going to want to eat 6 to 8 meals a day and just spend half an hour each time shoving that down, essentially. So we do have to consider practicality too. And for me, I have to say, like, I don't like too big of a meal in the middle of the day, because it makes me feel sluggish in the afternoon. At the same time, like, also I don't want to have a huge dinner, or that dinner that's really, really hard to digest at night and then prevents me from getting a good night's sleep. So there are a lot of things to consider for someone personally, right? It has to be right for you. And of course, so navigating around that, I think fiber is a huge component, or digestion is a huge component, because if you're trying to lean gain and you're constantly feeling bloated, or your digestive system is just having a hard time to catch up, then looking through your food log and thinking maybe we need to switch some of those high fiber vegetables for more things like spinach or whatever that's super easy to digest. Or maybe you don't need to eat 3 cups of berries, and instead we can have you eat a banana because it's a little bit easier to. And again, there's absolutely nothing wrong with berries. I love berries, but maybe it's like half a cup of berries and a banana and a half or so to sort of balance things out. So yeah, fiber, when it comes to fiber, I used to think back in the day, the more is the better, but I am, especially after working with hundreds of people and seeing that everyone's digestion is so different. Yes, some people can tolerate 50-60 grams of fiber. Other, especially more petite females, we do tend to struggle with digestion more than men on average. Maybe 20 grams is really all that you can handle, and that's absolutely fine. But let's find the sources that do make you feel good, where you can go to the bathroom somewhat regularly, because that's going to prevent you from feeling miserable throughout your gaining phase, or in any kind of phase actually as well. I don't know if that's something that you see among your clients also, where, again, like you said, many people think the cleaner the better. Especially, I don't know why I personally have such a weird connotation with rice. Maybe it does stem from my paleo time, but it was like, oh my gosh, rice, you're gonna eat that, and straight away it's like it spikes your blood sugar way too high. Well, but I guess it also comes from the fact that I know if I have rice in the middle of the day, I feel super sleepy. Like if I have a decent portion of rice in the middle of the day, I feel super sleepy like an hour later. And I just cannot, like with my work, I want to stay alert and awake throughout the day. So I'm actually bunching. I usually train in the morning, so I have a ton of carbs around the training essentially. And then my midday meal is a little bit lower in carbs, higher in fats. And then the evening meal is sort of more balanced again. Of course, protein being steady throughout, but yeah, that's just my experience with it.
Yeah, I think I get that sometimes where people, especially in the beginning, people they join a program, your coach program, mine, whatever, and they expect it has to be all clean, Mm-hmm. And I think as much as I am for mostly eating whole foods, mostly minimally processed foods, I think like clean eating, as it's almost like overrated.
Oh, totally.
In a way. Yes. Like if you take it too far, you know what I mean? Because yes, 100%. Like you want to have that stuff most of the time, like 80-90%, like 80% most of the time, maybe 90% in a cut or something. But like that's most definitely what we want to focus on. But that doesn't mean that you can't have the Oreo or the Fruit Loops or the cookies or whatever you want to have. Like there is a time and place for that. And I swear, just yesterday, I had a talk with someone who's currently struggling getting his calories up. Mm-hmm. And he actually needs a lot. So his maintenance calories turns out to be higher than what we expected. He's just very active, fast metabolism. So we're trying to crank up his calories, and he's at a good amount of fats already. He's at an amount of carbs where it's kind of like, well, that's already impressive to get in, So he's like, so what do I do now? Because I'm eating good, I'm eating healthy, I'm having my apples and snacks and all this stuff. And I look at his food log, and it's like probably like 90, some days even like 95-ish% like minimally processed or whole foods. I tell him too, like, hey, it's almost weird to say this as a nutrition coach, but I actually want you to add more flexible foods here. Mm-hmm. Because right now we're at a spot where you're eating your fruits, you're eating your vegetables. I know you take your greens drink and your supplements and stuff. So he's covered basically there. You know what I mean? Doesn't mean that we can just have an unlimited stuff of a limited amount of just like stuff on top of that. But we can most definitely add some flexible foods there. And in this case, that's going to be very beneficial.
Definitely. And I think even things like bread or wraps and so on, that goes down like pretty easy. And for most people, I mean, you can always get gluten free if you're sensitive to gluten. But for most people, that's something that's pretty easy to digest as well. And, a bun of bread is easily just snacked on, and you don't really notice it too much. And the other thing that you mentioned was just like, I guess if you have to get to that amount of carbs, you can even consider like an intra-workout carb shake potentially, like dextrose or maltose or highly branched cyclic dextrin. I think, that's not going to apply for most women, I would say, unless they're like super active or they do a highly glycolytic sport. But still, if you're really struggling, that's something where you can easily add another 25 or 50 grams of carbs even. I guess when it comes to training, that's probably something else we should touch on in terms of lean gaining, because I will say that I have changed up things with my training, and like overall, I'm super, super happy that the majority of my gains really have gone to my glutes so far, from what I can tell. But I will also say that it does feel right now that like all I'm doing is training my glutes. So it's not like I'm neglecting the other parts completely, but that's what it feels like to me. So for instance, I often also hear with clients, I want to shape my glutes more, etc. And then we talk about their training, and turns out they're only really hitting their glutes like once a week, maybe a second time, like indirectly, when they're doing like leg press a little bit or, whatever. But I'm like, well, how are you expecting to grow your glutes if you're really doing glute work once per week? That's just not going to happen. So prior to starting this lean gaining phase, I was doing 2 lower body days where I was hitting my glutes, but not as intentionally as I am now. Also because I have in the past trained a lot with just free weights, so like barbell, kettlebell, dumbbell, etc. And for the last 7-8 months, I have been going to a gym which also has machines. And I will say that if you have a specific target for a particular body part, that is where actually gyms do shine. Like, I'm a big proponent of free weights. I love free weights. And I truly think everyone can reach great physiques and athleticism with free weights alone. So if you have a home gym and you're like, oh no, I don't have that, don't worry, you can still, achieve your goals. But nonetheless, if you are really focused on a particular part, or bringing up a particular part, or bringing up just imbalances as well, I do think that a gym is going to come in very handy. So the reason I'm saying this is, great. We have great glute exercises with the hip thrust, with the deadlifts or Romanian deadlift in particular, squats also, of course. But things like kickbacks, honestly, they have allowed me to to just learn to feel my glutes more. I mean, I would like to say that even in the previous years, I had and have had reasonably decent mind-muscle connection, but I really wanted to put a particular focus on it, of like really being able to even just activate a muscle. Just, you know, I'm thinking of a body part and I can activate it right now, like a lat, or like just squeeze my left glute. As funny as that sounds, but like a lot of people can't do that. Or I do often hear like, hey, I'm doing hip thrust, but I'm not feeling my glutes. So if this is you, then things like glute kickbacks or those abduction machines, etc., they can be awesome. The thing that I actually also noticed when doing, because I slowed down my reps a lot also for things like Romanian deadlifts, just to increase the mind-muscle connection. I actually noticed, hey, my left hamstring is way weaker than my right hamstring. And I noticed that as well when I was doing leg curls. I at first had just done like bilateral, so with both legs. So it never really stood out to me. But then when you do more single-legged stuff, suddenly it was like, my right hamstring is always trying to take over. And of course, that has repercussions to the glute as well, how you activate those there. So that's actually something that I have really learned over these last few weeks, or I'm proud of discovering, especially so far into my journey, you know. And the thing is, of course, the longer you lift weights, yes, the more progress you make, but also the more opportunity you have to have small errors in the way that you move, because it just feels so natural to you. And then a year goes by and this error manifests even more, and this error manifests even more, and then throw in like maybe an injury here or there, which again brings things even more out of whack, and then causes you to shift maybe your weight more from here to there, or to pull more from this angle, whatever it is. Like I would like to argue that most people have something where they're probably not pushing through the right muscles or activating the right muscles in certain movements. And so coming more from like a CrossFit, strength, functional fitness type background, then digging into more of like a bodybuilder type training program over these last 7 months has been incredibly eye-opening and beneficial for me, and I think for my long-term health also, because of course the sooner you notice those discrepancies, those imbalances, the sooner you can address them. So like now that I know, hey, this hamstring is more easily activated than the other, I'm only doing single-legged leg curls because I know this is something that I want to work on. Or even during my RDLs, I'm like really focused and thinking of that left hamstring, like no. And I often can even feel it towards the later reps. I can sometimes even feel it, okay, now the right side is taking over, my left side is hardly working anymore. And so then I stop, even though I might not be close to failure. So that's just something that I have learned. But I guess for someone to take away from this would be, if you have a particular body part that you want to train, like don't be afraid to train it 3 times per week, I would say. I mean, start with 2 if you currently have only been doing once, but like at least like 3 times. And then really overthink also, how are you lifting? Because again, coming from more of a functional training perspective, I'm used to doing deadlifts or squats in the way that just pick the weight off the ground. Like that's all that matters. Like not all, but of course the form matters, etc. But when I approach lift, I go to the barbell. I'm like, my task here right now is to bring this barbell up from the ground to my hips and back down. But now when I approach a barbell with the intention of, I want to feel my hamstrings and my glutes, I'm going there and I'm like moving the barbell a little bit slower. That's not necessarily a requisite, but I'm approaching it more from the side of, okay, I want to feel that muscle, want to feel that muscle, want to feel that muscle. I'm extending my hip and then I'm lowering it back down. So it goes from like a task-focused approach to more of like just a muscle-focused approach. And where the reps fall is, I don't want to say it's secondary, but it's definitely not the important factor. And even if some days that means I'm lifting lighters just so that I can feel that muscle, I'm doing that now. But yeah, certainly very different to what my mindset was before. And I think it's just a cool way to continue to grow as a coach as well.
I think it's cool too to change up your training. So we both have a CrossFit background, and I also made that change a little while ago, right before we started to work together, to where I was just doing CrossFit. I kind of just burned out, hit a wall. I switched to almost like a power building ish program with just free weights, and then I completely wanted to switch over different gym, just a global gym, I guess, with machines. And I really like that change, and I still really enjoy it. It's stuck for the last couple of years for me. And right now it's just a nice combination of like barbell, dumbbells, and then some machines. And I really like that. And it's funny too, because like coming from like the CrossFit space, there was like this thing against machines for a little while, because like, no, we're the machine, But now it's cool to see that change again, as with everything fitness, to where, okay, now people understand like there's a time and place for both, But
well, exactly.
I wanted to bring up some.
Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, especially if you combine them nicely. I mean, a lot of great hybrid programs these days, they'll have you maybe not start off, but the main focus still being on the compounds. And then you have your 2-3 accessory lifts or exercises where you're like really focusing on your weaknesses and balancing things out, and just, I guess addressing those more isolated muscle groups.
Yeah, I like the combination. I think it helps me too, because, for example, when I do squats, I notice I have this weird like hip shift to the left a little bit, Mm-hmm. So I like to do some isolation work there too, or maybe do a leg press and stuff. And I like the combo. I think I'm more of a fan of machines at the moment than free weights. But like it's just nice to change it up too. And as you said, it's nice to actually feel that isolated muscle and really get a lot of work done there. Like target, like, okay, you want to, build your glutes. Okay, cool. Like, let's focus on that. Let's put additional sets there, maybe even different exercises, mm-hmm. so you can really almost like specialize in that for a block. But I wanted to bring something up because, we've been talking about building muscle here, you're female. I mean, men go through this too, but like I've seen this especially with female clients, to where I want to look better naked, basically. That's the goal, I come from the low carb, the cardio, etc. They're still very much into that mindset of, I need to look better, or I want to look better. I need to be doing cardio. I need to cut the carbs. I need to maybe do something like a boot camp or something. But you see now too, we're talking about building muscle, and you're doing a weightlifting based program. We haven't talked about cardio. We haven't talked about the body pump classes, or the jumping jacks, those kind of things, which are all fine, by the way. Don't get me wrong, but I think it's not common sense yet for most women that if you want to look better naked and you want to look leaner, we actually need to lift some weights there, like what's your take there? Like, let's say, for example, you onboard a new person, female, she wants to look better for summer. She wants to look leaner, right? Tone up. But they're only doing cardio, and that's kind of like the only thing they've done. And they kind of don't want to lift weights because they're afraid they're going to look bulky then. How would you go about that conversation? I think that's interesting for the listener, because coming from a female, it's probably kind of come over a little bit better than for me, I guess.
Well, I think you're mentioning, or you're touching on a really good point overall with this topic. As you said, it's still unfortunately widespread, and I understand it. I want to say that I understand it because.
Oh yeah.
Number one, those classes, they make you feel like you did something, right? You finish it and you're full of, you're dripping in sweat, or like even if you go for a run, you get all these endorphins and adrenaline rushing, and like it's fun. Number two, us women, we're actually more built or suited towards that moderate intensity but long duration sort of stuff. That's what, like, it feels easier to us. That's probably why we're also drawn towards that. So again, like I used to be drawn towards that more also. Like I loved the workout. I mean, CrossFit is slightly different to like F45 Orange Theory or whatever, but the thing was still like, for me, the variation is what I loved. I thought it was just so boring. You do all the same thing in the gym all the friggin' time. And I loved having a variation. I loved the community aspect. I loved having a teacher there who tells you what to do. You turn up after work and you don't need to think about anything. You don't need to look at your training schedule or whatever. You just have an instructor there. And then you feel great afterwards. You might even feel like you had a little bit of a burn or whatever in your legs or your glutes. So like, how is that quote unquote bad for me? That's what my thought was. How can this be bad for me if this is the one thing that makes me feel great in my day? Right. So that was the thought project. You know, work sucks or everything else is stressful. I have a ton of other problems, but this is like the 1 hour where you can just like power it out and you feel great afterwards. So then when someone said to me, or I mean, it tried to explain that to me, in the sense of, hey, Lisa, look at your lifestyle. Everything that you do is super high stressed. You're telling me you're not sleeping that well. You're telling me you have a little bit of lower belly fat that you really just can't get rid of. You're telling me your cycle is off. Like, all these are indications that your body is overall in a really high stress state. And I understand that even though you feel like the exercise is fun and not a stressor, it is a stressor. This is point number one. We need to acknowledge that a lot of this high intensity or interval stuff is a stressor. Point number two is you're telling me, you have a little bit of arm flab. You're telling me that you want to grow your glutes more and so on. And like, look at the exercises that you've just been doing. Or you're telling me you love running 2-3 times per week. What muscles are you really using when you're running? Well, it's kind of full body, but can you feel your glutes when you're running? No. Well, there you go. You're probably not using your glutes a whole heck of a lot if you look at the movement pattern. So what exercises do we have? And then, okay, well, we're doing more glute work in things like CrossFit or in many of these functional type classes. But again, the repetitions is so high. This is more in like an endurance, a strength endurance type setting. And the research shows really clearly that most hypertrophy, we really get between a rep range of, let's say, like 5 to 30. Yes, okay, 30 is high, but if someone might argue that yes, an Orange Theory or whatever you do type of 30 reps, but you're not getting the rest to reset and to add more weight. And this is the other thing that we need to see hypertrophy / muscle growth / shaping. We need to progressively overload. And in many of those classes, it's kind of like, hey, you have a time, do as many as you can, go as hard as you can, but you're sort of using the same weights all the time. Like, I'm saying this lovingly because I used to also do like body pump classes and so on. And you always know, for this and that exercise, I'm just using the little plates, and for this, I'm using the tiny plates. And like, you already have that in your mind. It's not that, okay, week 1 and 2, we're using this, week 3 and 4, we're adding just a tiny bit. Well, you even don't have the possibility because it's such a rushed class, right? So again, like from an evidence-based perspective, what do we need to shape a muscle? We need to have somewhere between 5 to 30 repetitions, 30 really being on the higher end. We need to progressively overload, and we need to go close to failure, or what feels like failure for those sets. And even though you feel like you're exhausting yourself with those classes, I would argue that in many times you're not actually going with a weight that's getting you close to failure. So that's the other part here. But the cortisol part really can't be understated, and that's what kind of woke me up. I also was facing a little bit of like an injury at the time, so I was actually more or less forced to stop with CrossFit for some time, and then started with the structured strength training as per instruction of this coach that was talking to me. And I will not lie, the first 3-4 months were boring as heck. I actually thought, I was like, because you leave the gym most of the time and you feel still okay. you still feel like you can walk. You still feel like you have some energy in the tank. And that was new or different to me, right? And that was actually like, I actually thought, I didn't give enough today. This cannot, can you give me like double the amount of work in this training program, because I want to feel exhausted when I get home. But it's such a backwards thinking, but that's just the place that we're often used to, and we're used to that adrenaline high after the training. But nonetheless, stuck with the program. And then after a few months, I realized, okay, I'm actually starting to see a difference. I'm actually starting to sleep better. I'm actually starting to feel like I have a little bit of energy left for the rest of my day, instead of finishing at the gym and just like being kind of trashed for the afternoon. So it was a combination of education, explanation, and like really, okay, this does have an evidence-based background. Like I'm a person where it's like, show me the evidence, show me where this stems from, what the research says. And then secondly, also, I mean, oftentimes we can see all the research that we want, but we need to see and feel it ourselves. So I get that point also when someone's like, yeah, it sounds convincing, but my feelings don't lie. I feel great after this training. I feel shitty after that training. But what I will say here is, again, you need to give it time. You can't just say like, hey, I've tried your new training program for a week or two. I'm not seeing a difference, and I feel shitty after my workouts. I'm going to go back to the way that I was training before because I actually felt exhausted and so on. That's not, that's not fair, but it's also just not effective, because you're essentially 2 weeks is not enough time for your cortisol to go down from that. And 2 weeks is also not enough time for any hypertrophy stimulation whatsoever. So I would just say, like, give it, at least a month. After a month, you should feel differences in terms of sleep, but give it more like 3 months or so. And then let's talk about it again. That would be my big recommendation here. But yeah, again, like I said, I get it if you're coming from that perspective. I totally get it. But again, what's your goal? Think about what's your goal. And even in those instances when you're like tempted to go for a run instead, or just go to your class instead, remind yourself, what is my goal? What's my actual why? And don't give into that short-term gratification, which it is to an extent. I guess most people don't think of like an exercise class as a short-term gratification, but think of your long-term goals instead. We hear that so often, but it applies here as well.
Yeah. So we're coming up on the hour. So I wanted to ask you one final question, really. So related to this stuff. So let's say someone really wants to run still. They like their cardio. They want to keep their running. Thinking from like a muscle building perspective, right? This person wants to build muscle. They do like their running. How much would you give them? Like, how much would you be like, hey, okay, cool. Let's do this much.
It probably depends on how much they were doing previously, and how important the quote unquote shaping is to them. I do think that something like a 3-day strength program paired with 2 or 3 times of running can work quite well still. If it's done in a strategic manner, meaning the person that programmed it properly, in the sense of giving your legs still enough rest and so on. If it's someone who wants to do like a run on the same day as their strength training, I would always make sure that the strength training comes first. Like, we want to, since that's what we kind of want to focus on more. And in those instances, I would also say just really making sure that we're not in a calorie deficit, because it does often happen if we add that much more cardio, but people keep eating the same way. You're not supplying your body with enough building blocks to build those muscles and to fuel your runs also. But really, since we're talking more about hypertrophy here, I would say, yeah, if you can keep it at 2 times, that would probably be good. We could, like, ideally maybe also more things that are still a little bit power oriented, or you could do like 1 minute sprint, 2 minutes lower run, 1 minute sprint, that type of thing. Or sled pushes or something like that. Like if you're saying, hey, I still want to work my cardiovascular system more for health wise, that would still be a good way to implement it.
Cool. Awesome. But, so it's not a marathon every day then?
No, that's what I would absolutely not advise. I guess the last thing that I will say to close off the lean gaining chat, or to like summarize it, is also that I did also really focus on recovery over these last few months. So really being a little bit more mindful of sleep, and really being diligent with taking supplements consistently, and what can I fine tune on that front. So overall, my strategies were like keeping the calorie surplus somewhat minimal, but still effective, so that I would gain about half a kg or a pound per month. Secondly, was basically the majority of the increase in calories came from carbs, and mostly bunched that around training times. And thirdly, optimizing like digestion to help with that. So really maybe sometimes more easier to digest things, implementing more simple carbs on that front. And then fourth point being the training aspect, really that should probably come, this is in no particular order, but you know what I mean? I'm really going goal focused and with a good amount of intensity on there, or training hard. And then the recovery optimization. So those will be my 5 points if someone is really lean gaining focused, and I guess you can include the minimal eating out in there as well. But hopefully this encouraged someone to do a bit of a lean gaining phase.
I think it will. I think it's really cool, and that's why I wanted to have you on too, to talk about this stuff, because I think it's cool to hear from like a female who's going through a lean gaining phase, the experience, kind of like things to focus on. Because again, like coming from a dude, like I could explain that, but I think it will be more convincing from a female, you know what I mean? So I think it's really cool that you're sharing that, and that you're also, mentioning things you kind of run into. So yeah, thank you. I think this was great.
Absolute pleasure.
Do you want to share anything? Do you have any important updates, anything coming up? Where can people find you?
I'm most active on Instagram, so it'll be nutrition, coaching, and life. And as Johan said, I also have a podcast, which is the Nutrition and Life podcast. And we also have a website, Nutrition, Coaching, and Life. So go check out some of our content, and I try to provide some valuable information on there as well. But otherwise, thank you so much for having me on.
Of course. Thank you very much. Awesome. So we'll make sure to link that down below. To the listener, thanks for listening. As always, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to share a screenshot in your stories, give us a quick rating on Spotify or Apple, and then we will talk to you again very soon.